Do-do-do-do. 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 Hello! Greetings. Greetings and salutations. More so than anybody else that's made a video on YouTube, I've got more hands-on time with the GFX100 than anybody else that's made a video on YouTube. And yeah, I actually went down the... People have had it for a little while. Most of the people have reviewed it. They had it for a week or two. Recently somebody reviewed it. I won't say who it was. They didn't know how to use the camera and gave an inaccurate review just because they were just too lazy to read the user manual. But I don't care about that person. The point is I would give a synopsis on the GFX100 here. 102 megapixels of Ibis controlled sensor. And I actually don't care about video. By the way, the video on this is phenomenal. I've had over a month of use on the GFX100. I was actually out shooting with it today until it started raining. Ibis, even though I don't care about video, and video is primarily important for Ibis, it is an issue that it is extremely helpful, and this is the world's first Ibis stabilized image, in-body image stabilization sensor for medium format, and that is due to shutter shock. The actual armatures that control the shutter blades, and there are two curtains, just kind of like two curtains on a movie theater, yes? They impart a shock to the camera. They actually cause it to jar, yeah? So Ibis is extremely useful, even though I don't care about video. The video on this camera, by the way, is absolutely phenomenal. By the way, also, too, if anybody is considering to purchase the GFX100, you're making a huge mistake by not buying the tilt adapter. It's this little hinge here that actually lets you use it as a tilt and swing adapter for the EVF viewfinder for the GFX100. Realistically, and I said this specifically, and it was a very bold statement when I did the full and final review on the GFX100, is that this is the world's, not my opinion, it's a fact, the world's first crossover medium format camera. Now what the hell does that mean? Let me give you an example, by the way. Something very important. Let's talk about the 150 megapixel phase 1. I talked to a very prestigious photographer out in Los Angeles. I've talked to him a few times. He's a friend of another friend, and he has a prestigious studio of photography, and he decided to invest a giant heap of money into phase 1. And he said, and these are his exact words, that it almost destroyed his photography career, because the camera is so insanely slow. It's slower than a constipated turtle. Now, is that 150 megapixels and it is a larger sensor? Yes. It's got one autofocus point. The autofocus is atrociously bad. It's obnoxiously huge, obnoxiously expensive. So, Fujifilm, of course, could not produce a camera like that with a larger medium format sensor because the glass would be huge, the camera would be obnoxiously enormous, the lenses would be insanely expensive. A lot of times when people make comments about cameras, they don't actually understand the cost-benefit analysis or crunching the numbers, if you will. It's like, well, we can make this camera, we need to make a certain percentage of price point. You can make the most amazing camera ever, but it would have everything in it, and it would be too expensive to produce due to too much labor or too much parts and/or parts and labor. Like the XT30, for example. You can't stick an Ibis mech into that camera. It would be thicker, it would be a lot more expensive, and it would not meet its price point. At $10,000, this is an insanely cheap medium format camera. Incredibly cheap. World's first crossover medium format camera. What the hell does that actually mean? This means, and give you a proper perspective, you may or may not have used this camera. Faster autofocus than my Nikon D4. When the Nikon D4 came out, and by the way, when it comes to sports and action, people have not gotten faster in the past 20 years, yeah? Animals haven't gotten faster, yeah. But when the Nikon D4 came out, I was like, oh my god, this camera's killer. And I've got two Nikon D4s. It's a killer, extremely well-built camera, just tough as nails. Plenty fast enough for most all sports action. People are just like, oh my god, it's an amazing camera. This has much better, faster, depending on the lens you use, and I have all the GFX lenses. Like the 63mm is not that damn fast, but that's due to the autofocus mechanism. And a lot of people don't realize that autofocus is not merely camera side, but it's also lens side. It's a combination of camera and lens. So this camera is faster for sports action than my Nikon D4. As so far as image output, way better than my Nikon D810, and certainly far better than my Nikon D850. Of course, you're dealing with a much larger image. You got 102 meg. By the way, people actually worry. A lot of people actually email me and worry about, oh my God, the raw files must be enormous. It's just going to step on the neck of my computer and just cause it to drool and slobber on itself and crash. No, as an example, using one of my slowest computers, which is a MacBook Air, it's only got 8 gig of RAM. Using Capture One, I have no issue processing raw files, 10 or 12 at a time. Just sit back and wait if you're going to batch process them all. Not an issue on a slow, that's not even a MacBook Pro, which I also happen to have. It's an 8 gig of RAM MacBook Air, which is, the bottom of the line. Just to give you an insight into, it's not an issue. Yes, the files are enormous, but it's not an issue. Maybe if I could do it with 8 gig of RAM on my MacBook Air, then, and that's a 2018 MacBook Air, by the way, then you should have absolutely no problem on anything that you have, which I'm sure has got more RAM in it than mine. World's first crossover medium format. So it's faster for sports action and street and wildlife. Not that this is specifically, obviously if you're doing hardcore sports, street, action, wildlife, photojournalism. However, this is more than capable enough for photojournalism. You would grab for your X-T3 or whatever full-frame camera that you already have. This camera is realistically no bigger than my Nikon D4. It's actually a bit smaller than my Nikon D4 is. This is not that big of a camera. It's not. This lens is kind of frigging big. This is a 32 to 64 zoom, a 24 to 50 millimeter equivalent. But made in Japan, all magnesium chassis. Build quality on this is no less than a Nikon D4 is. Nikon D4 wall thickness on the magnesium chassis is no thicker than this baby is. I'm still not going to subject the GFX100 to really insane weather conditions like a Nikon D4, obviously so. However, this is weather sealing, no different than that of the Nikon D4. I don't know the exact O-ring count between the two. I've actually taken apart a couple Nikon D4s. Like I said, I have a couple Nikon D4s. You only have to use one battery in this. It's a 2-battery tray. The vertical grip is integrated. And by the way, some of the stupid people, some of the YouTube shills, as I like to call them, they're complaining about the vertical grip on this. There's absolutely no complaint at all if you want to actually stick on some rubber pads on the front of this, because you're just, you're just so finicky that you just can't stand sticking your hand on the... I had actually, when I was sweating my guts out when I first started testing the GFX100 out at the horse park, I had no issue, but this is a heat sink. When you actually grab onto it and you haven't had a hold of the camera for a while, it feels very cool. This is a heat sink. Yeah, we'll say, why is this like this? Well, this is also... an amazing, I couldn't believe the video. I should have expected as much. Even though I don't really care about video, and I've got a nice 5K 27-inch iMac display, the video from this camera is just unbelievable. But anyway, this is a heat sink. I don't know if you know this or not, but rubber is an insulation. Could they have actually rounded this and stuck rubber on the front of it and then please people? Yes, but it needs to be a heat sink. There has to be some place for the heat to go. And this, of course, is one of the many problems that Sony has that they still really haven't fixed. I'm sorry, I had to interject a little jab in there at Sony. But what exactly are you going to compare this to? Are you going to compare it to a $50,000 Phase 1 that's slower than a constipated turtle, one autofocus point? By the way, a Phase 1 camera is a studio cat. Kind of like the cats that you never let out of the house. They're not designed, they don't have the wherewithal to do anything outside other than get hurt or get lost. It's a house cat camera. So what exactly are you going to compare this to? It's got faster autofocus than my Nikon D4, way better image output, and of course requires less enlargement to make the same size print than my Nikon D810. Well, I don't have the D810 anymore. I had one, but my Nikon D850, at $10,000, a few $1,000s more than that of a Nikon D5, which by the way is a rather miserable camera, very well built, but 20 megapixel. Has a anti-aliasing filter, a partial one anyway, on the Nikon D5. No. There's two people, well, there's really three types of people that would be buying the GFX100. And let's be realistic, brass tacks here. There are those people that are going to do work with it, and the camera's going to pay for itself almost overnight. Okay? You think 10,000 bucks is a lot? No. If you're doing some pro work with this camera, it's going to pay for itself overnight. Boom, that's it. Someone else that is a big-time camera enthusiast, they saw this coming for months and months and months, just as everybody else did, and they saved up to get it, and they're going to be incredibly happy about the image output on this camera. That's person number 2. Person 3 is kind of a mix of both of those, kind of, sort of. You know, they'll sell off a few cameras. You know, they really want the GFX. They've seen like some of the full-blown TIFF files that I've uploaded or somebody else has uploaded. Like, wow, this is what I want. I'm an enthusiast landscape photographer, or I want to do indoor architecture with just like the most crotch-melting, mind-boggling images that, you know, you just look at it. By the way, a lot of people look at the images. They'll look at JPEGs from this camera. It's like, well, I don't see why that's impressive. And I go, you know, you're looking at a JPEG from this camera, right? Take a look at a 600 megabyte TIFF file on like a 5K display. It doesn't have to be an Apple computer. I don't give a damn if you hate Apple. Just take a look at a 600 megabyte full-blown TIFF file from this damn camera on a 5K large display. I mean, just do that and see what happens. You'll have like an epiphany, you know, like Moses in the burning bush, or, you know, some sort of crazy-ass religious analogy like that. I mean, you'll go, oh my God, look at that. That's exactly what will happen to everybody. I loved when I uploaded, since people didn't have the ability to look at the raw files, at least a lot of people didn't, so I uploaded for people to download and to look at some full-blown TIFFs, 600, 700 megabytes, and, you know, I am assuming they had decent displays, and they're just like, oh my God. Really, I mean, that's what this camera is. What the hell are you going to compare it to? The world's first crossover medium format camera. You know, you're going to compare it to a super slow Studio Cat camera like a Phase 1? No, you're not. Is it expensive? Actually, no. I want you to take a look at the price of a 51 megapixel Mamiya Leaf Credo or a Pentax 645Z. Or that Chinese, wholly owned Hasselblad vile mess that I swear to God, nobody's bought that camera. I don't know what Hasselblad's going to do. They announced an update to that camera with the same sensor in it, which there's nothing wrong with that sensor. Same sensor in the GFX50S and 50. I swear to God, nobody's bought that camera. Nobody's reporting on it. It's like, oh my God, this is my new Hasselblad. No one's talking about it. It's because Fujifilm owns medium format now. And within just a period of 2 to 3 years, Fujifilm literally owned everybody's butt on medium format. People say, when is Fujifilm going to make a full frame? I've been saying this for years, and the president of Fujifilm came out and said it like a half a year ago. Why would they do that? It would be an incredibly dumb mistake. The market is insanely saturated. It would be an unending war that no one would ever win. It's just the full frame battlefield of Sony, Canon, Nikon. They're all down there murdering each other on the full-frame battlefield. Why the hell would Fujifilm stupidly jump into that crap hole? Let's spend a ton of money developing a full-frame camera and enter a endless war that will never win, and neither is anybody else, for that matter. You know, what's a better idea? Why don't we just, like, dominate everybody overnight, literally overnight, on medium format? And that's exactly what Fujifilm has done. I'm only actually taking one camera up to the Photo Plus convention, and it's insured, by the way. Yeah, okay. Just you know, in case anybody's interested. Yeah, it's insured. I'm only gonna take one camera. I'm gonna take 2 lenses and the GFX100 up to a Photo Plus convention. Yep. Anyway, I need to charge my batteries and I need to format my cards. However. And you're going to be like, why don't you do this off camera? And I'm going to be like, oh, why don't I just do it now? No, I'm going to do it off camera. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great weekend, and I'll catch some of you up in New York City. Yeah? Thanks.